Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Butterfly Effect podcast. As always, we are looking at The Last Stop. This one, as you can tell by the title and the video you've just clicked on, we are covering chapter 5. So Jack has just completed the chapter 5 of the lot. Before I get into this, though, I will say that for some reason I thought that there were 6 parts to the whole game. That's not the case. Each character actually has 6 parts, and then there's a seventh. So yeah, the game was actually longer than I initially thought. So that explains why in the previous episodes I was mentioning it, how I thought that this would be the finale. It's very much not the case. But yeah, we'll dive straight in. So Jack, did you keep the same order?
I did, yeah. So I started off with Mina in the Domestic Affairs series.
Oh, terrific then. So, overall opinion before we dive into the characters as well. What did you make of chapter 5? Do you think it stepped up from chapter 4 at all?
Yeah, it did. It did. I suppose, yeah. There's just certain story threads are starting to really get to a point of tension now, and they really started to like come to a head. So that can only bode well for chapter 6. And I feel like the game has almost gone out of that sort of lull period that sort of occurred in maybe chapter 2 and 3, because chapter 4, maybe John's one was good and the other two were okay, but I think all of them definitely went up in this run.
Yeah, definitely. So we mentioned how one of the things we did really like in the last one was the length. So I'm looking at this one. Instead of the 33-minute conciseness we got of the last one, this one's 10 minutes longer with 43. So I'm looking, Mina's chapter, the last time we saw it, whole thing was like about 3 scenes, and the whole thing lasted about 7 minutes, wasn't it? This time I'm looking, and it goes the length of it much longer. A lot of various scenes where we explore different characters as well, and it looks like the whole chapter is actually about 17 minutes long. So you get 10 minutes more content there. So yeah, I guess I'm just gonna dive straight in with Mina if that's where you started. Were you a fan of the chapter, Jack?
Yeah, I'd probably say it's her best one yet. You referring to the length of the episode there, I would sort of say like, why couldn't have they chopped this one up a little bit and tagged it on in chapter 4? Because I think you'd have perhaps got more overall satisfaction from Mina's story that way, because there are some like big sort of story things that take place in her part.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's no, I completely agree. I'd say as well it is her strongest chapter so far anyway. So did you want to talk us through it then? So yeah,
Yeah.
what did you like about the chapter?
Yeah, so I mean, you start off, you're trying to ring Felix, and at first I was quite puzzled as to why, because in the previous episode or the one before that, you sort of blow him off. You block him from your phone. You don't want to know him anymore. So it was quite weird for him, for this episode to start, for her trying to get in touch with him. Um, then you clearly find out later on that maybe she's just carry on pressing to try and find Wendy. But then it sort of moves to dropping Dylan off at school, and he's obviously heard the argument that his parents had the night previous, and when Mina threw the bottle and it like landed him in right in the head, and he's clearly worried that like his mum and dad are gonna split up, but at least in my run through anyway, I sort of said, no, everything's going to be okay. You know, don't worry, just go to school. You know, your dad's not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. And that was the end of that. And then it suddenly turned like Mina, like she becomes a stalker in this episode. Pretty bad. It's like she goes after Wendy, and obviously considering like she's in a school uniform, she's making her way onto school on her own, and like there's this sort of middle-aged woman following in the street. There's definitely room there for you sort of to question the character that you're playing as. But she essentially goes to Wendy and she says, "Look, why did you do the note? You know, if you did do the note, let's just put an end to it." she's like, no, I didn't do the note. And if that ends up being the case, then I'm glad, because that would have just been too an obvious candidate to do the note in order to expose Mina and Felix's affair. So you end up leaving her, and then you end up going to your dad's, where his flat has clearly been broken into, but he sort of sat there reading the paper, calm as you like, which is sort of quite jarring, quite strange. But I suppose this section's really filled up with mini games for Mina. So the first one being, you got to like stack his books on the shelf, like in the right place. And I did actually see that there was an achievement for this, and I was actually going for it, but the funny thing is that stopping the game to look for the achievement on like the trueachievements.com site actually screwed me over, because I hit pause on the menu and then I hit B to go back into the game, and for some reason that B sort of stuck with me and ended up putting the book into like the wrong section, so I didn't actually end up getting it. But apart from that, you also have this one where you're leveling the picture frame, and you also have a mini game where you're sort of putting pieces of sort of like bowls and mugs back together again, which at this point Mina's just had those moments where she's scanning people. So I don't know about you, but I think, the little bit of extra variety that she's had in this chapter does sort of elevate her story slightly.
Yeah, I'd agree. We always said that one of the biggest flaws of the game, maybe not necessarily a flaw, but lack of equality, I guess, was the fact John's chapter would definitely get a lot more love and attention. But yeah, Mina's chapter, this one, definitely the tides changed a little bit, or maybe not the tides changed, but Mina definitely got a lot more attention this one. Whether, like you say, the picture frame puzzle, the library one you mentioned, which side note, I used to work in a library, so it's quite shameful, Jack, you didn't get the platinum first
Yeah,
time.
I know. Yeah.
But yeah, like and then fixing the plates, and yeah, it's just the kind of thing that we've seen all through John's chapter, and it's nice that Mina got that attention. Like we said as well, it's felt like maybe in chapter 2 we saw Spider and the dad, but it seems like the last 2 chapters we've only really bounced between maybe the job and the family and maybe Felix, and it just felt nice to see a lot more characters. I think it covered all the bases, every single person in Mina's story almost, and it was just quite nice to see. So yeah, you obviously have the scene with the father afterwards, and you mentioned about how you follow Wendy, who was the prime suspect. It then follows with following Spider, right? So what did you make of that scene there?
Yeah, so I was actually at this point, because when you're following Spider and you see where he's going, you can see Dingwall Tower in the background. And do you remember in one of the previous episodes I said that Spider looks like Jack? You know,
Yeah,
so I was like looking at this and I was like, if he's heading to that place, is my like little theory or like little sort of observation about to come true here? But no, it didn't. He ended up sort of going to some sort of lockup, and that's where Mina confronts him. And again, like she did with Wendy, she accused him of the note and of breaking into her dad's flat, to which he admits to the break-in, but he doesn't, he doesn't admit to the mysterious note on her doorstep. And then it gets like quite heated, and he sort of like holds the gun up to her, and she has to calm the situation. And just when you think you know how the scene's going to play out, drops, throws this curveball at you, and suddenly Amy's there, and she's got a gun, and you're thinking, what? Like, how on earth is one Amy there? Two, why does she have a gun? And then next thing you know, they're pointing guns at one another, that being Amy and Spider. And, you're sort of sat there thinking, like, is Amy, like, has Amy been following me? Is Amy involved in the note? So they end up shooting one another, and Spider presumably dies, and so that's obviously that story thread over with, and then Amy's lying there. And if this is the reveal for her being the one leaving the note, then I think they could have done it a bit better. Maybe it's still open. I'm not sure, but it seems very much that Mina just sort of steps back for a minute and goes, "Oh yeah, so actually this makes sense. You know, you're the one that left the note, and you're trying to discredit me and fail me in getting the job." Which is fine. Like if that was the case, it's fine. I just think that it could have, made a little bit more obvious. Maybe like a flashback scene or a scene where you see Amy do these little things to disrupt your life. Then you just sort of, take her keys presumably and then run off, and she's just sort of left there. So you don't know if she dies or whether she gets picked up by an ambulance. But all the same, like it's a good cliffhanger to end on. So I'm looking forward to see what happens in Mina's chapter next.
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously, with whoever left the note, it was one of the big questions we answered, and there were a lot of suspects you did bring forward in the previous podcasts. So, obviously, Wendy, a big one. You mentioned how it could be Dan or Felix themselves. I think you mentioned how it could have been Amy pretty late on. So you did think of it as a suspect. I think it was right in the last one, right at the end, and
Yeah,
obviously, I was holding my tongue a little bit because I was like, "Oh, he's got it!" Like right at the end there, where you were like, "Oh, it could be Amy. It could be about the career." So obviously, it reveals it at the end that it is her. I do agree it was a bit maybe poorly done. They could have, done it slightly better. I will say though that in chapter 6 or part 6 or whatever it is, you will explore it, Amy, a bit more about the morals of why she did it. So like. It doesn't completely end on that note there. But yeah, a nice way to kind of end the chapter there for Mina. I felt it had quite a lot of depth. Like I say, just really nice to visit all the characters again. Well, especially the last one, we literally had 7 minutes content. That one we had 17. Um, so yeah, it kind of ties a lot of her stories. But it's nice the way it sets it up into the final one. But yeah, so anything else on Mina, or are you happy to talk about Donna?
So yeah, just to sort of come back on what you just said there, really, like it's good to know that in the next chapter we'll sort of see about Amy more, because obviously like she has this whole background with Jack in the other story as well, and in a way you wouldn't be able to blame her because like literally the first time you talk to her, she tries being nice to you, and obviously as the player you're shoehorned into this, but you treat her really bad, so in a way you can't blame her for sort of doing what she did, but who knows? There might be a darker edge to her that I've still got to find out about.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
I quite liked it. But yeah, so with Donna, chapter 5, Confessions of a Kidnapper. So quite a morbid episode. So it starts off at the hospital. Yeah, what did you make of the whole Donna chapter?
yeah, nice to see a new location, and obviously, yeah, the nurse comes out and she sort of says, that it's she's stable, but we don't recommend sort of you seeing her now. Sort of late to a what wait to a later point. So you and Emma leave the hospital and you're walking. You have sort of this chat where Emma sort of admits that she's tried to tell you about the seriousness of their mum's illness, but she hasn't been able to fully get there and tell her. So at this point, I in my run through, I told Emma the truth regarding the stranger, and you then start walking to the swimming pool where you've got him held up. And this section's weird because like you're forced into telling her a lie about him following you, and then you attack him and then you sort of leave him. But then immediately after, like, you then have an option to tell the truth, and I then told the truth. So it's a weird segment where like lying, but then you're immediately admitting to lying straight afterwards. Um, but essentially, yeah, like she then puts you in handcuffs, and there's like an achievement opportunity here, which I did get this time. So you basically got to get out of the restraints as quickly as possible. So you get out of that and then follow her in, and then the stranger isn't there, so she thinks that you're talking complete BS, and you're sort of sat there like trying to plead your case, but she's having none of it, and that she ends up going off saying, "I'm going to go to the hospital," and you go back in there, and what do you know? The stranger's there. So he's sort of toying with you at this point, and the whole sort of friend or foe question, it's leaning towards a foe because he's sort of making out that you're sort of losing your mind, and that you're sort of getting alienated more and more from the people that you care about. So anyway, he says to you, "Oh, I can help you with your mum," and I actually, why I did this, I don't know, but I actually accepted the help. And then you had this sequence, which is pretty good actually. Like the camera sort of swoops around, sort of like the town, and you end up in the hospital in the room where the mum is lying. And next thing you know, like she's getting removed from like the photo frame, and it's like God, like like this guy's like taking people out of her life, and comes like I was sort of thinking about it afterwards. Like I do wonder if the whole theory I had regarding the stranger being her dad.
Yeah.
I was thinking because no one, at least from what I can remember, no one's actually mentioned a dad at this point. So maybe for some reason, like the dad, got caught up and he went missing and I all forgot about him. But maybe he's come back somehow as this, dude with green eyes, and somehow his personality's somewhat stayed in there, and somehow he's also a bit alien as well. I don't know, could be completely wrong. Yeah, like again, like a decent cliffhanger because Donna's in a situation where she's pretty much completely on her own, and she's like, this stranger's affecting her life big time now.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that this chapter probably the weakest of the three. I know Donna's had that a few times. Um, I think mainly because Mina really stepped up. She had a really strong chapter. John's is always very good. But like you say, really nice to see a new location. So we got the hospital. But other than that, it's pretty much you and your sister, yours, then walking to the pool, and the scene very much ending. I do quite like the cliffhanger though. I think it's a 10-minute section, so not as bad as that one really poor Mina chapter that we had, but I think it is down there as a low tier chapter, I will say. But yeah, obviously it does tee it up quite nicely though for the end there. It's very interesting to see the stranger's intentions. He's obviously moved. I think it's the third person now in your life after Ash, Vivek, and now your mother. Because he wants you to, hurt less by forgetting people. So, obviously a moral choice there. But yeah, it's quite interesting the way he goes about it, and I find it very interesting how Donna herself forgets as well. She's unaware, but you as the gamer playing the game and the viewer, you know what the stranger's doing. So it almost has that effect where you're trying to smack through a glass ceiling to get Donna's attention, but to no avail. Which I think does almost weaken the choice element in the game, that you can't push yourself away from the stranger or have a go at him while you as the viewer knows what he's doing while Donna doesn't. But I don't know, there might be a beauty to that as well. I'm unsure.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I was gonna say like sometimes it can be really hit and miss, can't it? When the audience knows more than the characters in the story. Sometimes it can work brilliantly, and sometimes it can fall flat. And like as you said before, if you then couple that with the it's not even like an illusion. Like the story's very linear, and you can't maneuver that much in terms of Donna's attitude to the stranger. Then that just sort of the impact of the story does weaken.
yeah, I was gonna say, so like, with the audience knowing more than the character. I don't know, with these games, I just personally like uh feel like the characters are myself, and when I'm doing the choices that they have an effect, and I'm in the same loop as them. But when you're on different wavelengths to the character, it kind of jeopardizes that feeling a little bit. So yeah, like you say, very hit and miss. But yeah, like it'll be interesting to see what you think in the next chapter. How Donna's story does conclude there. So yeah, you happy to move on to John and Jack?
Yep, yep. So we'll move on to John's, and I now know what you mean about like the sort of the little football Easter egg, and I did
Yeah,
really like it. So essentially, you've got an interview. You know, you're John in Jack's body. You've got an interview for John's old job. So you meet Clive, and Clive's almost this sort of David Brent like character. If you don't know who David Brent is, then it's a character played by Ricky Gervais in the UK version of The Office.
yeah, he's the
And
British Michael Scott.
yeah, and essentially, yeah, you have this interview, and I essentially sort of went along with him to get the job. But then at one point he said, like, "What football team do you support?" And the options were Arsenal, Liverpool, and Tottenham. And I was like, "Fuck off! It's not going to be Tottenham." So yeah, I said Arsenal, and I don't know if this was the same for like every player, but he just sort of sat there and goes, "Yes, you're a gooner, like you're just like me." Was it the same for you? Like, I'm guessing you said Liverpool.
Yeah, so I'm looking at a playthrough while we talk about this just to jot my memory. And in the playthrough, there's the Arsenal version. So I've seen what he says. He goes on about the Queen being a gooner as well, right?
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So with me, he said something like, "Oh, top stuff. You'll never walk alone around here, mate." Yeah, like he doesn't necessarily imply he's a Liverpool fan, but I think he's just enthusiastic about it. I don't know what he says about Tottenham. It'll be interesting to see if he's positive as well about that one, or if he says something negative about it. But yeah, I don't know, just a nice little Easter egg in there that obviously Jack and I are quite, big football fans, so it's just, that was just a really nice Easter egg for us in particular.
So yeah, and then you then find out that you've got the job, and then what happens in the next sequence? It very much mirrors chapter one. So you've got the whole waking up. You go to the table. You're drinking a cup of tea. You're having a bowl of cereal, and then you get dressed, and then you've got to go back for the phone and stuff like that. Which as I've mentioned before, it's sort of nice parallels in the storytelling. But obviously, of course, this time you're in Jack's body, and there's like this really nice bit that follows after when you leave as John in Jack's body and Molly, where you can like race her to the end of the corridor. And like you hit the boost buttons and you like win, but there's like this sort of background cheering in the background, almost like a football crowd, sort of like cheering a goal or whatever. And it's just like it's these little sort of things that they've put into John's chapter that just reinforces the charm of this particular story, and it's got its own personality and identity going on with it. So I thought I'd give that a little nod because I did like that. Um, but yes, like then you see in the post that there's this person called the Vape Lord who seems to know what's going on about the body swapping. So you visit him, and he says that his brother was on the tube. I think he might have been referring to the stranger guy that sort of caused this in the first place. If not, then it's obviously somebody else. Um, but yeah, he sort of you give him his number, and he says, "Yeah, I'll get back to you." And I then believe that you then go to work. You meet like Shazia, whatever you want to pronounce it, and you have a sort of a little chat with her. And there's a moment where I think you can like ask her out. And I did say like as friends, and then she went, "Oh no, thank you." Oh, all right, only being nice. Um, so yeah, you go to work, but then like I make up for it by like backing her up against Clive, who's like clearly got some like photoshopped images of her. Um, then like send it to HR, and it essentially like it gets him the sack, and you sort of like adding salt to the wound by having like this little thing come out the printer that says like you know is it hope? No, it's not hope you're leaving or something like that. But yeah, so like obviously like Clive got his comeuppance for like being a dick earlier on in like chapter 1. So naturally you get on better with Shazia thereafter. And I suppose yeah, you go home from work, very positive. You say, oh, let's get a takeaway and stuff like that. But uh, Jack in John's body, maybe this has hit him a little bit because he's seen that you know he's not going anywhere with his life. And obviously he's now trapped in like an older man's body. He sort of feels like he's lost years of his life and he feels restricted. So he wants to get his life going again. And he says that he's applied for this course in Hull. And there's sort of a moment where they're like, well, no, you can't leave because we've still got, we're still in the wrong bodies. And he's like, well, this is permanent. We're going to have to deal with it. And this whole scene culminates in him then having a heart attack, which they did allude to in the previous episode that that John had heart problems, and again a good cliffhanger. So maybe he'll end up in the hospital as well, and that might have some play with the stranger overlapping possibly in their story as well. So yeah, like all of them had sort of decent to good cliffhangers going into part 6.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, like random tangent, but I'm pretty sure Donna's family second name is Adeleke, and I just have noticed that there's one of those crossovers where I think it might be Donna's mum, possibly an old teacher, where Molly quotes at one point, "Oh, do you remember when Mrs. Adeleke didn't believe that this was my signature or something?" So more crossovers for us to like eye on, which is quite nice. But yeah, all the points you mentioned about the chapter there, I very much agree. What I felt was very interesting as well is the point you mentioned about how it mirrored the opening chapter with John, where you wake up and you're doing your morning routine, but in a very different manner, but in a very similar manner as well at the same time. So obviously you're doing the same things where you're eating, you're talking to Molly, but you've got more of a spring in your step. While at the start you're very much like depressed, you're struggling to spin the plates all at once. Um, and it's a very bittersweet episode because there's very good moments with John where you win in the race, you bag a job. Not only that, but you get your sleazeball manager sacked. You feel like you're starting and you're getting used to your new lease of life. Uh, but yeah, like right at the end, it sort of switches to Jack in John's body, I guess. He's very much like, well, what about me? Like you say, he feels like he's lost years. He wants to go up north to see his friends and family. And then there's almost this moral conflict about whether Jack's supposed to live his life or whether he's tied to London. And then it ends up with him in the heart attack. So it ends on a bit of a sour note. But I thought the writing here was really good as well again. And topped as well by more Molly moments. We know I love those where they're trying to convince Jack to stay, and they're like, "Oh yeah, like you're her legal guardian," and Molly's like, "Yeah, you've got to stay. It's the law." And I was just like, "That's just like I said. It's never a dull moment with Molly. Hands down, best character of the game. If we do a tier list, I'm putting her right at the top, and she's getting her own category.
Yeah,
um,
God tier.
yeah, God tier, Molly tier. But yeah, definitely. So yeah, I just want to ask because obviously, there is a bit of a moral dilemma there. Do you think Jack in John's body has every right to be like, hang on, I want to go up north. I need to start my life again. I want to go up uni here. Or are you more kind of on John's side where you're like, nah, you need to stay in London?
I'm probably more on John's side purely for the fact that they should try to persevere with swapping their bodies back. I do sympathise with the viewpoint. Like he's clearly given up at this point. I think that's where his character's at. He's given up. Um, he's just sort of
I guess it's
accepted.
tough that he's lost his really nice flat and he's crashing on your sofa. Like that's not what he had planned like a week ago, I imagine, So it must be very difficult for him.
Yeah, exactly. But purely like, and I completely understand why he'd want to do that. I'd suppose naturally I'd side with John because he, they've got to try to stay together to try and figure out, how to swap their bodies back, and that would be my only reason really to have the characters remain really.
Yeah, so do you have any predictions of what his story is going to include in part 6? So obviously he's going to have to go to the Vape Lord solo at this point. I
Yeah,
mean, you have seen the Vape Lord, I guess, but the brother Frank, isn't it? You're going to have to sort that out by yourself.
yeah. Which is interesting because you know, when I sort of like see like this game, like they pretty much put John and Jack together. So, if you are going to this Vape Lord or his brother solo, I can only assume that maybe like Jack and John's bodies sat in hospital while you're going about, trying to sort of solve the problem of the body swap. And then if it resolves itself, then you can just sort of body swap and John will be back in the hospital, which actually that's quite alarming when you think about it, because if he is in hospital, like this could be again, sort of I'm trying to predict what could happen. It'd be like quite a tragic ending actually. Um, if he's in hospital and then they body swap and then John dies, that's got to be a kick in the teeth. Like, think for Molly. Like, you'd think, would she rather him stay in Jack's body and be a younger man and not look like her dad, or the alternative is horrible. So if it goes that way, God, that's going to be quite a morbid and chilling ending for something that's actually very humorous on the most part throughout.
Definitely, and it's actually really interesting you have mentioned that, and I can't speak for it because I know what happens, but just we'll remember this conversation and we'll remember that point you just raised because there is a little bit of relevance, I do guess, at the very end of this game.
Yeah, I mean, if that does come true, then obviously I'll be like sort of quite cocky in the in the final episode. But at the same time, it's that I'd probably still be surprised because as I said already, it is quite a feel good series, John's chapter. So to have that at the end, um, would be quite jarring from what we've played.
Yeah, it's like chapter 4 playing a nice piano song together. Part 5, someone gets a heart attack. It's like,
Yeah,
whoa.
yeah, they take you on a roller coaster. Certainly these games, but I think what I'll add actually before sort of as I wrap up what I've got to say anyway. Um, I find that how you were saying about the order of your sort of like your ranking of these stories. I remember you sort of saying, "Oh, it was between Donna and John." As you've gone back through it, Donna's isn't as good as what you thought. For
Yeah,
me, for me, like John is in front. It's between Donna and Mina that keep interchanging. And I think after this chapter, I'd probably put Mina like back up into second place at this point.
yeah, I'd agree.
Because my only real thing for her would be like the chapter lengths. And I'd say that if they simply moved a few of like the things in this episode into the last one and maybe the one previous, her story would have actually been better. Where as I think of Donna's, it had so much potential up to this point at least anyway. But a lot of the time you're just at the swimming pool talking to this stranger guy and there's maybe you're back and forth to your house, but like I said before, it was so good in her story to be in a new location, like the hospital. And I think that sort of says a lot in the sense that I'm quite, you know, tired and worn out of the swimming pool and a house and, just walking with people, you know?
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely held Donna's story up in high regards, and I'm looking back and almost questioning why. Because upon looking back at these chapters, John's hasn't changed. That's the front runner. But I had Donna closer to John and Jack rather than Mina, who I had quite low. But now I'm actually looking back, and like you say, I'm almost putting Mina first. And I don't know if something does change in chapter 6 in the finale, which did make me reach that conclusion. But I do agree. I think I was saying that Mina's story suffers because there's a lack of core there. Well, Donna's got the magic and with the stranger and the mystery and the disappearances, while John's got the body swap. Mina didn't really have all that much, but I look at it and Mina's chapter this time round was very strong. It didn't need all that much. There were, different characters, different things going on, and it was just a very enjoyable story. Donna's, you look at it and there's just really drawn out chats with this, stranger at a swimming pool. A lot of the cast that was there probably got, axed way too early by the stranger with the disappearances. But yeah, I don't know. There was also this love triangle that was potentially in there, but they didn't even explore that much. It probably was like a half-cooked story. And I look back at it, and I think certain areas were done pretty poorly, actually. And yeah, I definitely think Donna's chapter, there's things I would have definitely changed up. And it is a mystery to think that when I first played it, I thought it was way better than I am now reviewing it. But I think that's the benefit of going back through them, right? You definitely see things in your regard when you've, had time to process them. So yeah, I think that's probably what it is and what I'm going through.
Yeah, and as obviously as well, you played it differently to me, didn't you? Like you were far more sort of, you kept playing one after the other. Maybe the breaks somehow don't help Donna's story. I don't know, but yeah, completely right in what you allude to about the missed opportunity with the love triangle. And it's like, God, how many more times are they going to say, who's meant to be here looking after him? Like, it's just each chapter of Donna's seems like a rehash of the previous one with like a little bit of a tweak. So,
Yeah, like I think John and Mina's stories, I could you could cite a scene and I could probably tell you, oh, that was chapter 4, oh, that was chapter 2. But with Donna, it's just this random, muddly, like, cloud of, like, mishmash of, like, people at the swimming pool going back and forth, the house, the swimming pool, the hospital. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's a lot less enjoyable second time round. And while I'm, raising this question about chapter preferences, if you have played this game, obviously I'd love to know in the comments your tiers for the chapters. Which ones did you guys prefer? Are you agreement with us that you prefer Jack and John's stories, that it was just much better done? And would you say that which one was the weakest of them? Would you say that it's Mina or maybe even Donna? So I'd love to hear these opinions, what you thought, because we might even comment back on them. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see.
yeah, definitely. I mean, speaking for me personally at the moment, I would probably say that this was Mina's strongest chapter. So I think chapter 5 was the strongest for Mina. I think that chapter 4 was the strongest for John because of the humour and the various places they go to and the sense of, Britishness that gets fed through. I'd probably say Donna's best was chapter 1. I
Yeah,
think
completely agreed, mate. Everything you said, spot on.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I've grown quite weary and fatigued with her story because it's been such a long time since I've felt like she's had a really satisfying chapter. So, yeah, I'm going into this sort of like, Donna's the one, and I suppose the way I'm playing it as well with Mina, Donna, and then John, it's sort of like a shit sandwich at the minute.
Yeah,
To give it analogy, like it's like the chapter I've just played, it started strong, you know, you had an underwhelming one, but it finished strong. So, um, you know, there's that saying, isn't there, that like the first 10 minutes of a movie and the last 10 minutes of the movie are important for the viewer in terms of how they feel going into it and coming out of it. And I think it's the exact same here with these series.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So yeah, like you're near the end of the game. Is it everything you expected? Is it you excited to see how it's ended? And are you happy that we've dived into this game then?
Yeah, like first of all, yeah, I'm definitely happy that I've dived into this game because I certainly wouldn't have come across it otherwise. You know, obviously it's not necessarily choice based, but of course, like it does offer, you know, I don't know, like this might be sort of me sort of digging a bit into it, but I know there's not any choices per se, in terms of the dialogue, but getting to the end of the game, is there some level of choice? Like, is there a binary choice? Is there maybe three different endings? Um, or don't
Um,
ruin it.
it's not so much a spoiler, but each character will have two endings, and you'll get like pick A or pick B, and based off of those characters. So yeah, like for each character, you'll see one of two choices, and yeah, and so there is like a little bit of choice and variety at the end. Nothing too massive. Like we're talking like maybe a little bit of Life is Strange level where you can save, Chloe or Arcadia Bay, that kind of thing. But
Yeah,
yeah, so it's not like Until Dawn levels of, oh yeah, like you have eight characters. It could be that none of them are at the end. It could be that six of them are. But there is a little bit of because I know there has been a bit of disappointment surrounding the lack of choice. The dialogue doesn't even add that much. But it's nice that the ending does give us somewhat a little bit of variety there. Obviously, I've made my choices, and it'll be good for us to, match and compare to what we both did afterwards. Um, there's nothing like with the Telltale where you get to see what public the percentage chose. I don't think there is anyway. So, it'll be interesting to see what other people did as well. But yeah, I guess we'll get to that bridge when we come to it in the next two chapters. So there's one more, their finales, and then there's the bonus chapter where they're all together at the end.
right. Okay. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they all come together because, like I said in the previous one, Mina's one hasn't really had any sort of science fictiony stuff going on. Um, whereas the other two have. So I feel like the other two, you could sort of manufacture a situation where they end up crossing paths, but it'll be interesting to see how Mina comes into the equation for them all to meet.
Yeah, like if
And
I
that's the thing.
sat
So
here and asked you, what do you reckon's gonna happen with Mina? There's no way you're getting it. Like it's just yeah, it goes so weird. But yeah, like in a good way though. I actually quite like it.
yeah, and like I say, we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, like I suppose to round up, I've certainly, you know, I've enjoyed playing it. In terms of the stories, they've been good enough for me to stay invested and want to know, see what happens. And obviously, now that you've told me that there are sort of binary choices at the end, you know, that does, you know, fill me up with some sort of optimism and all round satisfaction with the fact that there is that sort of interactive nature of it, and you get to sort of decide your own ending. So I do like that, and yeah, it doesn't pull up trees. It's not breaking boundaries this game, but I had a good ride with it.
Yeah, nice little enjoyable experience. And yeah, I do think I would have been massively let down if there wasn't that binary choice at the end. If it just was this absolute linear game where there was no choice whatsoever and everyone just got the same game. Whilst everyone had to, be Donna and ask, like whose schedule it is to go to the swimming pool. I think that would have been an absolute misery.
Yeah,
But yeah, I'm happy to wrap it up there if you are, mate.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so as always, guys, yeah, let us know what you're thinking of the Last Stop series. If you've played it, give us your thoughts, what you thought of the game. Are there any points that we've said that you disagree with potentially? Let us know so we can, comment on them afterwards and, debate you guys, whatever it is. But yeah, this is a game that I brought forward and it's, really interesting to see how Jack's, going forward with the choices and stuff. And as the game's coming to a conclusion, I really can't wait for you to get your teeth stuck into the next lot just to see what you choose, I guess. But yeah, yeah, don't forget to like and subscribe, guys, and pass, the podcast around to anyone who might be interested. But yeah, I guess until next time, guys, thank you very much for joining us, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Yep, see you then.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of
The Butterfly Effect Podcast.
brought to you by Harvey's Razors, the closest killer shave a man can get. Now, before we get into today's topic, remember to share this video with your friends and smash that like button.